watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Angela at 20 minutes to 8.
Let's have a look at the newspapers for you today. Front page of the Times this morning draws attention to a defiant Donald Trump launching a fight back against New York prosecutors yesterday after being indicted on criminal charges.
The Eye gives light to rising prices, putting pressure on Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt to cut taxes this year, as Britain sees its biggest tax squeeze in 30 years.
The Guardian reports on Sir Keir Starmer accusing the government of turning Britain's waterways into an open sewer.
While the front page of the Telegraph this morning reporting that the US President Joe Biden is not going to attend the King's coronation next month, but he may well send the First Lady.
The Express details the PM's belief that Britain's blockbuster trade pact with Pacific nations is the reason why he voted for Brexit.
And finally, the Mirror dedicates their front page to Paul O'Grady, specifically to donations to his beloved animal centre. Looks as if they're going to hit 100,000 this weekend.
Well, let's go through the papers in a bit more detail with the political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, and the writer and commentator, Candice Holdsworth. Good morning to you both. Nice to see you. Kevin, let's start with the cheery headline in the Eye that we're facing the biggest tax squeeze for 30 years.
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty miserable April. We all know already probably that our council tax going up, your water bill's going up, your internet broadband's probably going up. Basically every monthly outgoing you've got is going up on top of inflation already at 10.1%. But I think probably the one thing that people might have forgotten about is that we're all going to get a tax rise as well, which is going to be in your next pay packet, because they're freezing the thresholds at which you start paying higher rates of tax. So a lot of people have been, they call it fiscal dragged into paying, they'll go maybe from paying like 20% up to 40% overnight. And yeah, I think it's going to come as a shock to a lot of people when they get their next pay slip. And it just so happens that this is happening just before the local elections in May, which will be an opportunity for people to maybe register a protest at the state of their personal finances.
Hunt is going to be under real pressure, isn't he, to lower taxes before the end of the year?
Yeah, and I think there's a fair chance that ahead of the next election, so next year sometime, we'll see taxes come down as a nice sweetener before the general election.
Isn't the trouble then that everybody sees that cynically, as you say, as a sweetener?
Yeah, exactly. That is the gamble, but I guess the government would be thinking, well, they'll probably they make the priority, more money in my pocket. Yes, it's cynical. Yes, we know what you're up to. It's a bung, basically, to vote for us, but they'll see past that and just vote with their wallet. That's what they'll hope.
Yes. What do you reckon, Candice?
Yeah, I think people's financial resilience is low. I mean, there was a guy who was on here a few weeks ago from Plum, the financial advisory company, who said people just cannot tolerate even small rises now in payments. I mean, it's just coming from all sides. Interest rates are going up, so mortgage holders are under huge pressure. I mean, when people come to remortgage their houses, there's a big concern that a lot of people just aren't going to be able to meet those payments, especially now with council taxes going up, taxes going up, everything going up.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting because obviously so much of our economy is based around the housing market. Is it going to stop people selling?
Well, that's the other thing, that the house prices are forecast to fall, which I guess is good news if you are
3%, which is actually quite a big percentage.
But it means people are less likely to put their homes on the market until the market turns around. So it's a bit
so you get that problem again.
A vicious circle, really.
Yeah. Yes, let's have a look at the Telegraph and the King coronation.
Yes, so this is the front page of the Telegraph. It says Joe Biden will not attend the King's coronation. Now, apparently it's not viewed as a snub. I mean, historically, US presidents have never attended coronations. In fact, when Joe Biden attended the Queen's funeral last year, that took the palace by surprise. They weren't expecting that at all. But I think because she was such a universally respected figure, he felt he could. Because I think there are attitudes in America towards monarchy that go back a very long way, you know, revolutionary attitudes, Republican attitudes. But with the Queen's death, that was sort of put aside and he attended.
Right.
Yeah, Mrs. Biden out buying a new hat then already.
Yes, well, apparently he might send Jill Biden or Kamala Harris. So there is a sort of reaching out of the hand of friendship, but he's not going to be attending.
I think it'd be quite nice to see Dr. Biden over there. I mean, whatever your political views on Joe, she garners quite a lot of respect, Dr. Biden, doesn't she?
She does, yeah. They would be
quite
nice to see her. Kevin, we are probably not, we are going to be seeing, apparently, Belarusian and Russian tennis players at Wimbledon this year. What do we think about that?
Yeah, I mean, so this is a controversial decision, a difficult decision. The Lawn Tennis Association boss has said that. They've obviously thought about it long and hard. They were banned last year, obviously, in the wake of the invasion in February. And it's a tough one. Now, it's not going to be as it was before the war started. They're going to have to sign neutrality agreements, so they're not going to be playing under their national flags. So they're not going to be representing Russia or Belarus.
So they're sort of mirroring what the Olympic Committee have decided.
Exactly,
yes.
exactly. However, critics will say, well, but you're still tacitly condoning in that way the invasion, which, I'm a bit torn on it, because you think the individual sports people, it's not their fault what Vladimir Putin did. So why should they be punished from taking part? I mean, Wimbledon, let's face it, is the tennis tournament. If you're a tennis pro, that's the one tournament that you want to play in. So last year they weren't allowed to. This year they will be. But yeah, it's not.
It's interesting though, isn't it? You say it's a controversial decision, but it was controversial last year when they were banned.
Absolutely.
So you can't win, can you?
They can't win. I think that's why it's been such a difficult one, an agonising decision for the lawn tennis.
But I'm pretty sure that they were able to play in the Australian Open and the French Open.
Right. I think that's right.
Well,
yeah. So
did.
Wimbledon.
And the American. I think they played in the American Open.
Yeah. So there is precedent. So Wimbledon, I guess, can point to say, we're not out on a limb here.
No.
I think someone from the Lawn Tennis Association drove past me on the M1 this morning from their number plate. Personalised number plate.
Oh, we shouldn't say what it was.
Probably shouldn't say what it was, but it was a personalised plate, something LTA, and I thought, if that's not them, I don't know who is.
Might have been a tennis player.
Might have been a tennis player. Might have been.
Right.
Candice, The Times looking at Oscar Pistorius being denied parole. I'm interested in your take on this, because you were in court for some of the hearings, weren't you?
Yes, I was in South Africa in 2013 when this happened, and I went to his initial hearing at the courtroom in Pretoria. It was bedlam. I mean, us journalists were fighting to get in. I mean, I actually had fights with people. I mean, people telling me, get out the way, I'm going in first, because you had to get approval to be in the courtroom. This is quite interesting, because this story, I mean, it's kind of buried in the Times. Interest has certainly waned in the story. He's been denied parole. So he was up for parole, and the parole board has said, no, you haven't served enough of your sentence. You'll be eligible again to be heard before the parole board. Reeva Steenkamp's family have actually welcomed this because they don't believe he should be freed. They don't think he showed any remorse. They still don't believe his story. His lawyers have argued, well, because he was initially convicted on manslaughter charges, he's actually served enough of his sentence, because he's currently in prison on a murder charge. That was the second charge. His initial one was overturned. I mean, it's just fascinating to me to watch this play out. I mean, it was a huge circus when it happened, but now these legal wranglings are getting a lot less attention. But for me, I've seen my own views evolve on the Oscar Pistorius trial. Did he do it? Didn't he do it? I mean, initially I thought that it was plausible that he really did think it was a burglar, but then other things I've read since then have made me wonder about that, especially his ex-girlfriend's mother, who said he was a bit controlling. So yeah, I'd like to know what you guys think about that as well.
Well, it's a very, very difficult case, I think, and what always struck me was just how distraught he was in court.
Yes.
But I mean, that doesn't... it's trying to gauge someone's intention in those circumstances. It's impossible, isn't it?
And that's the way the South African legal system works. I mean, there were various charges, and it does take into account the state of mind of the person who was committing the act. So initially it was thought that though he hadn't intended to kill her, he had, so he was convicted on that charge. But the prosecution they were completely skeptical of all of that. I mean, they accused him of lying in the courtroom, so they wanted to go for a much tougher charge.
Yeah.
Entirely different. There's a headline that matches the photograph in the Times of Richie Sunak looking into potholes. And he's actually doing that.
It's a wonderful picture.
It is.
Which we haven't got.
Which we haven't got, but
there we go.
Rishi Sunak.
He is peering into a pothole. There he is.
Looking at a pothole with local... he's in Darlington yesterday, and with local politicians. And, it's the local election campaign now. May the 4th is a local election. And it just shows, as the story says here, all politics is local. Now, it might seem a bit ridiculous. A couple of weeks ago he was signing a big deal with the EU. He's this trade deal that we were talking about earlier. But actually, What actually matters and gets people exercised is things like potholes.
Well, it does, because it's not just, it's the damage to your car.
Absolutely.
It ends up costing you a lot of money.
Absolutely. You know, and if your roads are full of potholes, you're going to blame the local council, so you're not going to vote for them. Whereas if they then come out and say, you know what, vote for us and we will fix all the potholes, fine, I'll vote for you. So it's actually really, really important. So, as I say, it's funny to see the most powerful man in the country staring at a hole in the ground, but in actual fact, it's important politics.
Yeah,
I remember John Major going to his local constituency when there was something really important going through Parliament, talking to everyone. All they were interested in was dog mess in the street. That was what it came down to.
It matters, doesn't
yes,
it?
Yes, it does.
Potholes, mess in the street, bin collections, it all matters.
That's what matters to people.
Look, we are out of time, but we shall catch up with you both a little bit later on. Thank you very much indeed.